Hey, what is up, everybody? This is Stevie Breach coming to you here tonight as we're going to be taking a look at WWE SummerSlam 2018. As of right now, we are looking at the rumored card that is going to be there. I can honestly tell you that I haven't watched SummerSlam in 2 years. I don't want to be that guy who comes out and basically says he's disgruntled because, basically I had a ticket to go to SummerSlam each and every year. I went for 6 years from 2010 all the way until 2015 before it was moved out of Southern California to be heading over to New York. But I was there. I was all up in that SummerSlam. I loved every minute of going to all of those shows. And SummerSlam is always looked at as, one of the biggest shows of the year right behind WrestleMania. But I didn't watch SummerSlam 2016. I didn't watch SummerSlam 2017. No real reason why. I guess I just had other stuff to do. I can't even tell you that if I've ever even watched it after the fact. I just know that I didn't watch it live. I do know that I have watched Finn Balor winning the championship, but I think that was the only match that I watched off of that whole entire show 2 years ago. I can tell you right now, as of looking at what SummerSlam 2018 looks like, this looks like a pretty good show. And judging right off of the bat, you got the Universal Championship match, which more than likely is going to be the main event of the show. It's Brock Lesnar going up against Roman Reigns and Bobby Lashley. This Monday, on Monday Night Raw, we have Roman Reigns going against Bobby Lashley in the #1 contenders match. And in that match, I just made a video on it today. I basically picked Roman to get the win, and then basically Lashley to come out and say, hey, I beat you at the pay-per-view, WWE Extreme Rules 2018. I think we should, do it again as a rubber match, and basically that's how we just end up with a triple threat at the pay-per-view. So, as of right now, looks like I'm pretty damn smart. From there we go to the WWE Championship match of AJ Styles going against Samoa Joe. This is going to be a really good match. I was honestly asking for this match to happen at WWE's WrestleMania 33 in Orlando, thinking that this would be a pretty good joke on TNA because of the fact, Orlando being the home of Impact Wrestling, it being the home of WrestleMania 33. It would be a pretty good joke of two of the biggest stars of TNA that had jumped over to WWE, had a match, in the same city on the biggest stage of them all. I know that by watching last week's episode of SmackDown, Andre Cien Almas, some people can say that maybe he's not ready. I think that guy is going to be a star, and when it came down to it, I picked him as the guy that would be drafted during the Superstar Shakeup from NXT to SmackDown, and when it came to fruition, I told everybody, this is a guy that could be main eventing SmackDown by SummerSlam. I really thought that was going to be a match. I didn't think that he was going to win on SmackDown. I didn't think that was going to happen, but that was as good a match as he could have had. And where we go from here, from Cien Almas, I know that it's a roll of the dice. He could, just start winning matches against mid-card guys left and right and move his way up the card and become a main event guy by later in the year before we get into the Royal Rumble time. But, or he could just all of a sudden just sort of be forgotten about. But he had a really good match against AJ Styles. He showed how good he was. I think that Styles versus Almas is a match of the future. But Styles versus Joe, I think, is somebody that could put the WWE's championship in jeopardy. Obviously, AJ Styles has held on to that belt for a long time. He's coming up on big records in WWE. Guys like Hulk Hogan, Bret Hart, Yokozuna. I think he's coming up on John Cena and JBL's runs that they've had lately. So Joe is a guy to be taken, not to be taken lightly. I think that he is a guy that could be taking that belt from AJ. I think that's going to be a really good match that people are really going to be happy to see. This match is already coming together. We have Ronda Rousey, who is granted being the number 1 contender to Alexa Bliss. After Alexa Bliss came in and caused Rousey's match to be tossed out at Backlash? It wasn't at Extreme Rules. I'm pretty sure it was at Backlash. And, from there, no, it was at Money in the Bank. Because right after that, Alexa Bliss cashed in the Money in the Bank briefcase on Nia Jax to become the new Raw Women's Champion. But basically, Kurt Angle said, hey, Rousey, you stay away from Bliss for 1 week, you're the #1 contender, and we're having a match at SummerSlam. That's going to be a good one. Hopefully that's Rousey finally getting that strap put up around her waist. And I know that Alexa Bliss is going to give her one hell of a match to give her. SmackDown's Women's Championship, we saw Becky Lynch getting back in the hunt, going after Carmella. I really think this is going to be a good match. Becky Lynch, when the original draft that a lot of people have been pointing fingers at over the last week because of the 2-year anniversary. Becky Lynch was the person I thought was going to be the leader of SmackDown. I thought they basically drafted SmackDown the way they did because Becky Lynch had not had a chance to be WWE Champion as of yet. And I thought that Becky Lynch was going to be the chick to run SmackDown, basically the way that AJ Styles has done since that draft as well. But Alexa Bliss became an emerging star. I believe that Becky Lynch was originally going to be the #1 contender at the No Mercy pay-per-view very early on after the draft in 2016, but due to injury, they had to move that match back until they went to Scotland, where Becky Lynch did become the champion, but then lost the belt back to Alexa Bliss pretty fast. So let's see if Becky can actually capture that belt from Carmella. That's a match that I honestly would bet against Carmella on. Becky Lynch to get the win there. Who gives a care about the B team? We got B team going up against Matt Hardy and Bray against the Revival. I am a fan of the Revival. I can't remember the last time they had a really good match on television that I liked, but that could be a good one. We've got Nakamura versus Randy Orton against Jeff Hardy. This is the reason why Randy Orton has been returning and beating up Jeff Hardy. I guess he's really into that United States Championship. I thought that basically Orton won the U.S. title around WrestleMania time just because it was the only way to get him onto the WrestleMania pay-per-view, but here he is getting right back into the United States Championship. Obviously, Randy is taking a little bit of a knock and stepping down a little bit to where he is now just sort of that mid-card guy, but hopefully we'll see one more run of Randy Orton before it's all said and done. John Cena versus The Undertaker is a rumored match. I can honestly tell you that I've already made a video about that, and I'm really hoping that we don't see it, but, you know, I don't write the cards here in WWE. And then we've got Daniel Bryan going up against The Miz. This, of course, is going to be their big match that was rumored to happen for over the 2 years that Daniel Bryan was the GM of SmackDown, where Daniel Bryan and The Miz had that run-in on Talking Smack, and basically that led to the WWE writers as well as Vince McMahon basically saying there's no way for us to put this match on because Daniel Bryan will never be cleared. We need to have these guys separated, but the heat was so good that they had to pair these guys together and string it along, and now here we are, Daniel Bryan finally being cleared and ready to wrestle. This is the match that people have been really wanting to see. People are going to be pumped for this. My only hope is that, you know, Daniel Bryan or The Miz, whoever can win this feud, moves into the title picture because both of these guys need it. I sort of understand them wanting to stay away from Bryan, but there comes a point when what's the point of having this guy wrestle if you're scared to put him in the big matches because you're scared that he's going to get hurt? If he's doing that, just release him, let him go wrestle on the independents. It doesn't really make sense to string this guy along and never put him in situations where he can win the big one. Then we also got Sasha Banks versus Bayley. I'm guessing this is going to be added if they don't do the rumored WWE Tag Team Championships for the women's division. But this match has been rumored along enough. I was really surprised that they didn't run. This is sort of a impromptu match at Extreme Rules where they were doing the therapy in the back and they just started fighting. They brawled their way down the stage and then they just started beating the crap out of each other right there in the middle of the ring, hitting each other with kendo sticks and stuff like that. I really thought something like that was going to happen, but instead they weren't booked and we didn't see them. The main women's rivalry that's been going down on Monday Night Raw for the past month, maybe even longer, and they weren't even used on the pay-per-view. So we'll see what goes down. As of right now, I think the WWE SummerSlam 2018 looks like one hell of a card. Hopefully you guys are going to be pumped for it because as of right now, I'm pretty pumped. Hey, what is up, everybody? This is Stevie Breach coming to you here poolside. We're sitting here chilling. I'm watching some Dan Le Batard. I noticed that, honestly, I made videos on just about everything for WWE SummerSlam 2018. I'm really getting excited and looking forward to this card. But yesterday on 205 Live, they named the Cruiserweight Championship match, which is going to be Cedric Alexander, the champion, going up against Drew Gulak. Drew Gulak was one of my favorite guys in 205 Live, coming out there with this whole PowerPoint presentations, always sort of giving his takes on why he was the best guy that was on 205 Live, why he should be going after the championship. But honestly, I haven't watched 205 Live in a long time. And for somebody who mostly was following 205 Live, just basically following what was going on WWE's Twitter feed, you know, right now, when SmackDown ends over on USA, they start showing the new Miz show, Miz and Miss, with him and Maurice, and it's really hard to follow what's going on 205 Live, because it really looks like WWE is making the Miz reality show more of a forefront thing to talk about than it is, you know, following what's going on 205 Live. I'm wondering if 205 Live is even a brand that is worth WWE continuing. Obviously, from its debut, it has not really been anything anybody's been excited to see when going to see SmackDown tapings. Many people leaving early, many people not really paying attention to what's going on, empty arenas. Is this something that maybe WWE needs to look forward to just sort of scrapping and moving into a new direction? I understand you don't have to scrap the whole Cruiserweight division. You could just move them back to Monday Night Raw, where I haven't seen them have a match, honestly, in a really long time, or just place them on the SmackDown, and some of these guys can try to become stars, where they just sort of merge into the main storylines of the show. There's a lot of guys on here that have a lot of talent, and putting them in, you know, weird sort of situations against guys that are bigger than them, having matches on them, could really get these guys over to the point where people really want to follow what's going on. If you think about, you know, what's sort of mainstream coming out of 205 Live, maybe the Lucha House Party, which they just came out with a new shirt, sort of taking off on the In Your House t-shirt design from back in the day. Cedric Alexander's been the champion since Enzo left. I believe he won the championship at WrestleMania. So he's been going on a little bit of a run. But besides for that, really, what's going on 205 Live that most people are talking about? You know, Cedric Alexander's the champion. He came out today apologizing for offensive tweets that he posted in the past, because it seems like that's about anything anybody has time for these days. Anybody's having a good day, whether if it's somebody almost throwing a no-hitter in baseball or pitching in the All-Star game. All of a sudden, you know, people start diving into seeing what I can find on somebody that's out there. So, obviously, you know, this has happened in WWE in the past, like with Apollo Crews. And Apollo Crews had a pretty good run going for him before those tweets surfaced. And then all of a sudden, he's just sort of been stuck in this whole Titus Worldwide ordeal, not really going anywhere. So, maybe this is something that's going to make Cedric lose the championship. But if it just comes down to it, who's the better one, picking Cedric to get the win. Hey, what is up, everybody? This is Stephen Breach coming to you here today as we are sitting here in Florida. It is nearing the end of our vacation, as we are sooner to be done. But we got a rainy day today. It looks awful bright out there, but there's raindrops coming down. We're probably going to be stuck in the house most of the day. Last night, between watching the Braves and Marlins game, I was able to check out SmackDown. SmackDown's biggest angle they had going down revolved around the Women's Championship with Carmella and Becky Lynch. Basically, they added a new participant into the match. We are now adding in Charlotte Flair, who was able to defeat Carmella to make the Women's Championship match at SummerSlam going to be a triple threat. This is pretty cool. I mean, honestly, I was really looking forward to Becky Lynch taking place as being the top dog of the women's division on SmackDown. Sort of forgetting about Charlotte. Charlotte came back from her injury yesterday, having her first match, her big return, where she was able to get a win over the champion. And now she's going to be in that triple threat at SummerSlam. This is going to be a big match. It seems that with the WWE Evolution pay-per-view, a lot of the storylines have sort of switched and changed. Now we see Becky Lynch and Carmella basically as friends, but at the same time participants in a big match for a championship. Becky Lynch, throughout the show, basically was saying that she was not going to be rooting against her friend, that she could not do that. But the second that Charlotte won the match, and the second that Charlotte was named as a competitor at SummerSlam, you can see Becky Lynch lose her composure, basically melting into almost a different person, where you could see that there was some, maybe not hate, but there definitely was some concern that Charlotte, at her peak performance, has really showed in WWE that she's been better than Becky, and I know they've had some matches here and there, and I think Becky might even have more wins against Charlotte than Charlotte has against Becky. But this adds a whole new, composure to this match as we inch towards Evolution. There's been lots of rumors that basically maybe one of the reasons that the Sasha Banks and Bayley feud was ended. For all we know, maybe it hasn't, and maybe this is just part of the story, is that they get back together and they're friends again. But one of the reasons why they're on the same team again is that maybe at Evolution we're going to be actually seeing that 4 horsewomen match that we've been hearing so much about for so many years, where Ronda Rousey's team will take on WWE's team in some sort of elimination tag match. And this match has been rumored for WrestleMania. It was rumored for Survivor Series. So somewhere down the road it has to happen. I think if they do that Evolution match, where you see, Team Ronda Rousey going up against Team WWE, it inches us closer to that WrestleMania 35 main event that we've been thinking about, which would be Charlotte Flair going up against Ronda Rousey, and which would be the true main event of WrestleMania, where WWE could tout out the fact that they actually had a women's match main event of WrestleMania, closing it out, being the last match, Ronda Rousey being the biggest star in the company, and just putting that big exclamation point on the Women's Revolution. At this time, basically, you see Carmella coming with the championship. This is easily the biggest matches he's had as champion, and it has to be one of those matches that you really think that she has a chance to lose that belt. The only thing that I think that Carmella could use in her factor is how much Becky Lynch and Charlotte are not going to be able to work as a team in this match, and maybe not so much turn against each other, but maybe thinking that they're each other's biggest competition in this match, where they take the fight to them and just basically leave Carmella exposed to where maybe she could pick up an easy pinfall along the way. My first thought is I still think this is going to be the summer of Becky. I think that Becky wins the championship at SummerSlam. I think that Charlotte is just basically along for the ride to give her a match at SummerSlam, maybe setting up the match against Rousey down the road, and we'll see where we go from there. But this is going to be fun. SummerSlam really looking like the best card they've had in quite a few years. WWE SummerSlam 2018, we're going to see the Intercontinental Championship put on the line when Seth Rollins tries to get revenge over Dolph Ziggler. Last month at Extreme Rules, we had the Iron Man match to finish out the show. Most people thought that with Rollins and Ziggler giving us a real wrestling match to close out a pay-per-view, that the fans would go crazy, getting to see something that we have not seen in quite some time, having real wrestling action instead of just having a brawling main event. And the fans crapped all over it, whether if it's just not being able to keep their attention for a 30-minute match, but the fans chanted for everything other than under the sun, other than Rollins versus Ziggler. You could tell that Rollins and Ziggler lost their cool inside of the ring, not knowing how to get the fans back into the match. It just seems that at this point, WWE has sort of lost base with its fans on trying to figure out what they want. And here they are trying to make them happy, and it's almost every single move that they make, it's not able to make a difference. Rollins versus Ziggler, if it's put into the middle of a show, or even to be the opening match of a show, I think is going to get people up on their feet. They go out there and they give them a good 12 to 15 minute match. It's going to be able to be that real wrestling match that people can point at and say this is going to be the best match of the night, and this is going to be the match that people are going to be talking about the next night over all the moves that these guys hit. Ziggler, when WWE has faith in, you know, he always sort of gives a performance to back it up. I know that, you know, in the past we've seen performances by Dolph Ziggler where he's gone out and closed out pay-per-views, whether if it's been the TLC, where he had the ladder match against John Cena, or whether if it was the Survivor Series where he helped Team Cena beat the Authority, where he closes out pay-per-views just like he did last month at Extreme Rules, and people think this is going to be the start of the big push of Dolph Ziggler, and you know, within a month it is all forgotten. If you go back to the push of Dolph Ziggler last year, he came in, he beat Baron Corbin for the United States Championship. He gave up the title, basically saying that it was below him. He left for a little bit, returned, basically saying that he wanted to fight for a championship. And, you know, that worked for a month or two, but then come WrestleMania, he just was fighting in the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal, just like a lot of the other guys that are in his position, trying to find something that just don't have it. If he's not going to fight for anything other than the World Heavyweight Championship, why is he fighting for the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal? That didn't really make a whole lot of sense, and it sort of killed his push in my mind and a lot of other people's along the way. Rollins is the guy that you can count on to be having one of the best matches on pay-per-views night in and night out. I don't think that SummerSlam is going to be anything other than that. So at this time, I think that Rollins is going to pull out the win, getting the Intercontinental title back, and I think a series of matches with him as well as Ziggler are going to come down the road. I don't think this feud is anywhere close to being done, and where Drew McIntyre fits into all this, we'll have to see. Hey, what is up, everybody? This is Stevie Breach coming to you here as we're counting down until SummerSlam 2018. It looks like we're going to be setting up another Braun Strowman versus Kevin Owens match, and I can honestly tell you that as of right now, I'm kind of done with this whole, you know, Braun Strowman versus Kevin Owens feud. It seems like in my mind, this feud has been played out over, you know, Monday Night Raw for months now. We've seen this matches on pay-per-view, and for it to come down to SummerSlam, it doesn't really seem like it's a much appealing match for me. The one thing that is coming out of this, more than likely, is we're going to see some sort of a stipulation with the Money in the Bank briefcase being put on the line on Monday. Some people said that Kevin Owens picked up the Money in the Bank briefcase for the reason that he did not want Braun Strowman to cash in because Brock Lesnar was in the building. I honestly think that Kevin Owens sort of looked at this as a moment to sort of steal the Money in the Bank briefcase. I know in the past we've seen the Money in the Bank briefcase sort of been stolen. I know that Cody Rhodes stole it from Damian Sandow in the past. I know that Dean Ambrose stole it from Seth Rollins. And I know that there's no real rules that go along with the Money in the Bank briefcase. They sort of make things up on the fly. But I think that in my rule book, I sort of think that Kevin Owens, if any opportunity would come up, would be able to cash in that Money in the Bank briefcase at any time. If I was WWE, if I was in charge of the house shows, I would have Kevin Owens running down to the ring. Well, fuck, you can't really do that because Brock Lesnar doesn't work house shows. But in my mind, that would be a perfectly good storyline to be running on these house shows, as Kevin Owens trying to cash in this briefcase, only to be interrupted by Braun Strowman for trying to get revenge and get his case back. But more than likely on house shows, we'll see, you know, the Money in the Bank briefcase being put up on the line as a reason to keep people's interest during these. But I don't know if they do a ladder match or just a straight up just pinfall wins the briefcase. We've seen the briefcase be put up on the line in a ladder match between Dolph Ziggler and John Cena at TLC years ago, which ended up being a really good main event for the show that Ziggler actually got the win on. One of those few pay-per-views where Ziggler's actually into the pay-per-view with the win, and everybody goes crazy thinking that this is going to be the start of the push of Dolph Ziggler that we have never seen. I think that you know, having sort of a stipulation of keeping that briefcase means something when, you know, Brock isn't on the shows is going to keep it fun for the next few weeks. So I like this. So we'll see how this one plays out. But in the end, I think Braun wins. Braun cashes in to end up SummerSlam. I think that is going to be the overall story of SummerSlam, is Braun Strowman becoming the champion. Hey, what is up, everybody? This is Stevie Breach coming to you here today with another match that's already been named for the SummerSlam Spectacular in 2018 is going to be Ronda Rousey getting her second shot at the WWE Women's Championship. She's going to be going up against Alexa Bliss, and no doubt in her corner is going to be Mickie James. Of course, at Money in the Bank, this feud was kicked off when Alexa Bliss, who had freshly won the Money in the Bank briefcase, ran down during the Ronda Rousey versus Nia Jax match, ending it in a disqualification and then also cashing in and becoming champion herself. This, of course, was the first chance that Ronda Rousey had to go for the WWE Monday Night Raw Women's Championship, and looked at, you know, the kickoff of her really singles career in the WWE, paying off on her the big contract, bringing her over from UFC after her career ended. And as you can see, Ronda Rousey did not like the tactics that Alexa Bliss used to put herself over and become the champion at her expense. Basically, after the beatdown on Monday Night Raw, Kurt Angle had to step in as the GM of Monday Night Raw, suspending Ronda Rousey for 30 days. I think that was mostly because of the fact of how many Monday Night Raw dates there were in between Money in the Bank and SummerSlam, to basically keep the what's the word I'm looking for? To just keep the feud fresh, because you can only have Ronda Rousey pummeling Alexa Bliss so many times. We've seen basically WWE use the same tactic with Brock Lesnar, where he would go out and have a big match, and then of course there wouldn't be a chance for him to have a rematch because of how expensive he is for a countless amount of time. So they would just sort of suspend him for his actions and then just sort of bring him back in when the time was right in WWE. I know that Ronda Rousey is supposed to be a full-time employee, and she's also been doing you know, Monday Night Raw house dates and things like that. So I hope that we aren't going to continuously see Ronda Rousey get suspended throughout her time in WWE to basically keep her fresh and not have her on TV, and find ways to use her, as she is basically a full-time wrestler in the company now. So let's find new ways to sort of keep her fresh and in her mind. But I'm hoping that she's going to be winning the championship from Alexa Bliss at the pay-per-view. I know that this is not a slam dunk. If you go back and you think about Nakamura getting the shot going up against Jinder Mahal at last year's SummerSlam, we all thought that was going to be a lock. And at the end of the show, Nakamura was not holding that championship. And still to this date, Nakamura has not been able to win the WWE Championship. And he's sort of looked at as one of the main guys that they brought in from New Japan Pro Wrestling to sort of bring in a lot of people around the world to see how good this guy is, and they haven't really put him over. Ronda Rousey, I honestly think that she's going to be the champion. I think the match that they're going to be setting up for Evolution, if not Evolution, WrestleMania 35, would be Charlotte Flair versus Ronda Rousey. That definitely is the match that I think the biggest match that they could have for Ronda, and for Ronda to have that championship, or for Charlotte to have the SmackDown title, or find some way to move her over. I think that's the biggest match that WWE could have to spotlight the women's revolution, seeing how they're the two best wrestling women that are in the company. So that's what we have to set us up for. I don't know what to think. I was about to say that Monday Night Raw is the A brand, but with that big Fox deal, a lot of people are saying that SmackDown will now become the A brand. But we've been saying that for years when we talk about them rebranding SmackDown and trying to make it the bigger show. So I don't know how we get to that end point, but you know, Ronda Rousey beating Alexa Bliss for the championship, I think, is the start of it. So let's see what goes down at SummerSlam, but I got my money on Ronda Rousey. Hey, what is up, everybody? This is Stevie Breach coming to you here tonight on WWE SmackDown Live. We had the #1 contender finally named for AJ Styles, for AJ to compete, putting up the WWE World Heavyweight Championship at SummerSlam, the second biggest show of the year. That's going to be coming to you live from the Barclays Center. This is a big match for everyone involved, and I think this one is probably the best bet that they could have. WWE ended up paying off on the rumored card that was out there on the internet. You can see it in various places. I made a video about it the other day, just giving my thoughts, and I honestly thought that this was one of the best SummerSlam cards that they've put together in quite a while, seeing how I have not watched SummerSlam the last 2 years. I did not watch SummerSlam 2016 or 2018, but this year the main match that we're going to be getting from SmackDown Live is going to be AJ Styles putting up the championship against Samoa Joe. I had heard this was going to be the match, but as I was sitting here watching SmackDown Live, there was a match on the show, CM Almas going up against Rusev, where I thought this was kind of a weird situation to put two heels up against each other. I thought that these were the last two matches that AJ Styles had, even though AJ had won both of those matches. They were both pretty good. Would this sort of be a number one contenders match to see who would go to SummerSlam? As the match paid off, there was no number one contender stipulation named. There was no sort of press conference after, and I thought that it was sort of weird. Paige came down to the ring to make her announcement on who AJ Styles' contender was going to be, and from out of nowhere, AJ Styles was jumped by Samoa Joe, and Samoa Joe signed the contract. I'm guessing that's going to put into place AJ Styles versus Samoa Joe. We're going to pay off on all of the history that is TNA, Global Impact Wrestling, whatever that you would like to call it. I'm always going to refer to it as TNA because of the fact that I've been following the product since 2002. The same reason that I still call WWE WWF every once in a while, because it's just burned into the brain that way. If you go back, you think about all those Impact years, Joe and AJ Styles were two of the best homegrown talent that was in that company, even though AJ Styles spent some time in WCW. Samoa Joe went through Ring of Honor before both ended up there, and they honestly really created magic in the bottle. And even though they were wrestling there during what we're going to do is we're going to pay off on the traditions of TNA Impact Wrestling. AJ Styles and Samoa Joe were the guys that honestly built that place. And Samoa Joe was the guy that was in the main event going up against Kurt Angle when TNA reached the highest highs that it ever was at. And as TNA was constantly pushing itself, bringing in more stars that were more familiar to a WWE base, a fan trying to branch out and become an alternative, AJ and Samoa Joe found themselves falling down the card. If you can remember going back into the whole TNA Bound for Glory series, something that I thought that was a really, really good idea was the fact that you were pushing tournament style matches, making every match matter on Impact. Not every single match was very predictable at the same pace, but as they were doing those in the first Bound for Glory series, Samoa Joe scored -4 points to end the tournament. I think that Joe lost every match that he was in, and even lost the match via disqualification, and that is one of the reasons why he did not gain any points and ended up with negative points. AJ Styles, no matter where you put him on the card, he was in tag matches. He was Christian Cage's lackey. At the time he finally left TNA, they started to push him again, but the problem was they didn't want to pay him. But I thought that this was a match that they could have put together for WrestleMania a few years ago in Orlando. I thought that it would have been a very funny thing that WWE normally likes to pull off, like basically pulling a rib, where Impact Wrestling wrestled at Universal Studios in Orlando at the Impact Zone for so long, and now here we are doing AJ Styles versus Samoa Joe one more time on the grandest stage of them all, WrestleMania, with the thousands of fans in attendance, to just make the Impact Zone look like the smallest thing in the world. Honestly, when it comes down to it, I think this is the match that AJ Styles could lose. I know that when I looked at the last pay-per-view against Rusev, there was a little glimmer of, what if in the back of my mind, because of the fact that AJ has held the championship for so long that you just think maybe this is going to be just like Jinder Mahal beating Randy Orton, that, on any given day, anyone in WWE, they're there for a reason. Anybody can beat the champion on any one given day. And that's why they have these matches on house shows and on SmackDown and Raw and everything like that. But when it comes down to it, Samoa Joe, even though, he really, You know, he's had main event matches sporadically throughout his time in WWE. He's a guy that honestly doesn't lose that much. He's a guy that they've always really kept hot. Somebody that you really know could go out there and handle their business against just about anybody on the card. Joe versus Braun Strowman with some really good matches. I think that Joe's got a really good chance of winning this match. And I honestly think that as of right now, I think Joe might be the favorite to beat AJ Styles, because who wouldn't want to see Joe versus AJ, 3 months in a row on WWE pay-per-view? I think that's going to be a pretty good thing. So I'm really looking forward to SummerSlam 2018. I know it's going to be coming up in a few weeks here on the WWE Network, and as of right now, I got my money on Samoa Joe. Alright, last night on WWE Monday Night Raw, we had the number one contenders match for, WWE SummerSlam 2018. We had Roman Reigns going up against Bobby Lashley. And in that match, Roman Reigns was able to come out on top, making him the number one contender to have a match against Brock Lesnar. At Monday Night Raw, at SummerSlam for the WWE Championship. This is probably going to be the main event. As of right now, if you've seen my WWE SummerSlam 2018 card, I don't think this is the end of the story for Bobby Lashley. I listened to the Wrestling Observer this morning. I saw all the headlines coming out that Bobby Lashley not looking to have a match at SummerSlam. I think there's a lot of people out there who, like to write stories or maybe cover things that know how to get, hits on their stories that they post on the internet that, maybe sometimes they don't understand Dave Meltzer. Dave Meltzer does not like to come out and just flat out spoil what is going to happen. He's not just going to come out and when Brian asks, well, what's the plan for Bobby Lashley? And just say, oh, he's going to come out next week and it's going to be added to this and it's going to be a three-way. Dave never really said what the plan was for Bobby Lashley. He let Brian just spew off a lot of things like, well, what's he going to do? Is he going to have a match against Kevin Owens? Is he going to call Sami Zayn? That's kind of what they went through. Dave was never really answering the question. I don't see how you have Bobby Lashley beat Roman Reigns at Extreme Rules, turn around 2 weeks later and have a number one contenders match where Roman beats Bobby, and that's the end of the story. And Lashley doesn't come out and say, hey, we need to make this 2 out of 3. We need to make sure who the better man is. I think I can beat Brock. You've had your chance. You haven't been able to do it. And what do you know? Now we have a three-way. Especially with the fact that Brock Lesnar is going to be attendance at Monday Night Raw next week. This is really something that they could pay off somewhere down the road, making this a really big SummerSlam. A three-way sounds like it's a big ordeal. You've got Roman beating up Brock Lesnar. You've got Bobby Lashley beating up Brock Lesnar. Then you've got, somebody getting the win, and then Braun Strowman coming out and cashing in the Money in the Bank to become the new champion. I think that's a lot of the stories that people have. As of right now, Roman Reigns versus Brock Lesnar is... I honestly can't think of how many times we've seen this match. I know that we saw it at WrestleMania 31. I know that we saw it... at WrestleMania 34. I know that we saw it at the World's Greatest Royal Rumble. And Roman has not been able to get the win in any of those matches. I know that there was an asterisk that, Seth Rollins cashed in during 31, where Rollins ended up getting the win after making it a three-way. But let's face it, go back and watch that match. Rollins cashing in, he did Roman a favor, because Brock was beating the crap out of Roman, and even though Roman kept getting up and didn't die down to Brock Lesnar, there was no way that Roman was going to win that match. Brock had him in the palm of his hands and was throwing him from corner to corner, from post to post, and it was just a matter of time before Roman was down for that 3 count. I think a three-way livens it up. I'm not the biggest Bobby Lashley fan. I'm not rooting for Bobby Lashley to get the win. I'm not upset that Bobby's not in the match. But I think that it's just going to have to be what it's going to be. Obviously, as of right now, if they do Brock versus Roman as the main event for SummerSlam in the New York market, WWE does not know their fan base. because unless they really think that they're brainwashing people, these Brock Lesnar stories, that Brock doesn't want to show up, that Brock doesn't want to lose the championship, Brock doesn't want to be in WWE anymore. Yes, Brock Lesnar is going to have a fight with Daniel Cormier somewhere down the road for UFC. This is not a new story. We've seen this play out when he had the fight against Mark Hunt at UFC 200. There's a lot of money out there for Brock Lesnar. And Brock Lesnar's going to go out there and he's going to get that money from UFC because that's what anyone else would do. If someone offered Dolph Ziggler, $10 million to go wash cars on a Saturday at the local car wash, Dolph Ziggler's going to be down there, waxing them cars. That's just what it's going to do. When someone's offering that kind of money, you're going to go make it. I know that WWE thinks that, by putting these stories out there, wrestling fans are going to turn on Brock, thinking that Brock is putting UFC over WWE, when really Brock is just sitting home, collecting a paycheck, and doing whatever he's told to do in the first place. So that's what they're hoping, is that, people are so sick of Brock holding that championship, not defending it, that we're really going to cheer Roman when he picks him up, goes through the 5 moves of doom with the spear and all that. We'll have to see what pays out at the pay-per-view, but I think that as of right now, Strowman is walking out the champion, and I think that just has to be that it pays out at SummerSlam.